low interest rates, the union busting and deregulation. Okay,
and they've done all of that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's their MO. This is what they do. And now we have corporations across Canada sitting on approximately, as a result of these measures, approximately $500 billion of surplus cash. Cash that could be used to create jobs, could be used to invest in infrastructure like technology and R&D or whatever, you know what I mean? But it's cash that companies have that's not being invested in any kind of economic stimulus.
And no matter what political stripe you come from or an economist come from, more often than not, they say if somebody is sitting around on tons of cash and not investing it, that usually means that they don't know what to do. It's not that they don't want to spend this money, it's that they actually just simply don't know what to do with it. Well, and here you have Jim Flaherty, who has let all this happen. He's done everything they've asked for, and now he says to them, it's time to loosen your fists and invest this money. And I guess I have to question Jim Flaherty's how genuine he's being here.
Well, I'm sure, Mike, that he might like them to do that, because if they don't, then the Conservatives have a real problem on their hands, because they need to create jobs. You know, they need to produce economic growth. Otherwise, they fail as a government and you know, harm their chances of being reelected. At the end of the day, the Canadian people will vote according to their economic self-interest. People that are fearing for the future of the economy of this country will take that into account when they go to the polls. You know what I mean? So I don't distrust that necessarily. I think that the Conservatives are obviously way too in bed with these giant moneyed interests. However, I'm sure that the Conservatives would love to see them spending some cash on some job creation plans.
I definitely don't agree with you. I guess the part that makes it difficult for me to give them complete trust in this is they know these people that they're in bed with, and they know that these people are out for their shareholders and for their profits, and that their concerns aren't the concerns of the economy of Canada.
Right.
And yet we see time and time again the Conservatives do nothing but give tax credits and all these tax relief for job creation, and then it's still just, it never happens. You know, they haven't been listened to in the past. They're not going to get listened to in the future. And for them to come out and kind of bitch and moan about the problem that they've created just seems, a little bit suspect to me. Well, I mean, I guess I'd have to agree with you, though, that they obviously want them to spend this money.
Yeah, because they want some cover for their ideology, right? Because basically this situation is a very dramatic impugnment of trickle-down economics. Like when you bust the unions, when you have low interest, when you deregulate and you cut taxes to corporations, people say, well, we're putting money in the hands of the job creators, so to speak. So this is good for everybody. When we directly benefit the rich, the poor somehow indirectly benefit. You know what I mean? That's the essence of trickle-down economics. And right now, I don't doubt that the Conservatives probably want a little bit of cover for their ideology. They're standing out there naked right now. They've done everything that a trickle-down economist or trickle-down plan would have them do. And it's not producing results. What it is producing is giant hordes of cash that these moneyed interests are hanging on to.
Which ultimately, though, isn't really that strange of an outcome whenever trickle-down or supply-side economics are applied,
absolutely.
Right?
It's totally predictable.
So for them to do the same thing, who was it? Was it Einstein that said to continue doing the same thing and expect different results?
That's the definition
of insanity.
That's
right?
insanity, absolutely. Yes. Well, I mean, I'm not going to disagree with you on that. I think that there's elements of insanity in trickle-down economics. This is how you see it as pushing a rope right now, right? Like it's pushing a rope, like a flaccid rope of money and incentives into this machine. It doesn't accept it. It takes It's taking the money, but it's not flowing through how you thought it would. Now, of course, the corporate interests defend themselves by saying, well, given the shakiness of the economy and the shakiness of the financial sector, we don't want to be stuck in a position where we have a liquidity crisis again when the capital markets dry up. They don't want to be in a position where they need to borrow money and cannot, so they'd rather just have money on hand. That's
Right.
what they say, okay? And that in itself makes sense. You know, you could say, well, it's like saving for a rainy day almost.
Except for the fact that if they don't reinvest the money,
Except-
chances are
yeah.
the economy isn't going to rebound.
Exactly. They're producing the outcome, the negative outcome that they fear by their actions. And second of all, they're lying about what they're doing with it. They're not keeping it on hand. They're floating it and they're speculating with it. They're gambling it within this in the you know, the casino.
I'm glad you said that too, because that in itself is another part that just seems to erode our whole system. You know, like it just doesn't make any sense that their whole approach. And just I should quickly say here too that Mark Carney is another person who has come out recently, and I think he might have been at the Canadian Auto Workers Convention.
Yeah, that's where he spoke. Yeah,
and he said the exact same thing, and he got hit back hard by businesses saying exactly what you're saying. You know, they gave all these different companies gave all these different statements basically saying, oh, we have invested a whole bunch of money, and this money is just to ensure or assure our investors.
Yeah.
And they're really trying to play a game like that they're not guilty here at all, but really, like you say, they're investing the money in.
And lest we bathe Mark Carney in too much of a warm glow, it should be noted that one thing he's recommended to these companies is to pay the money out in dividends to their shareholders.
Right.
Because supposedly the shareholders will invest it. You know what the shareholders are going to do, who are for the most part pension funds and rich people? They're going to reinvest that money in the stock market again. You know what I mean?
Right.
There has to be something done about this. It shouldn't be legal, okay, for corporate interests to do speculative investing. It shouldn't be.
No, it shouldn't at all. We need to regulate those kind of things and make sure that that when this money when they finally get off of their giant pile of money and start putting it back in the economy, it doesn't end up in the economy that way.
And while I'm on the subject of what shareholders would be doing with the money should they have it paid out to them in dividends, I don't think it should be legal for Canada's pension funds, such as the teacher's pension or CPP, to be investing in China, which is what they are doing to a very large extent. I don't like the teacher's pension, and I think that they should be required to keep their money in Canada.
Well, there's a whole bunch of things that could definitely be done to improve the situation.
Yeah.
So there's a number of really good articles out there, and I'm going to post a whole bunch of these up on the Facebook page a little later on for people to read through, because there's so many different perspectives that came out in the media. And like I say, this is another issue where at least we're seeing coverage of it, and we're seeing people question it. And I think that if people read these 3 or 4 articles, that it'll probably lead them to have a few more questions and dig around a little bit more and get an idea of what's going on out there. But I would just like to say, I guess, looking back on Flaherty again too, I think the most disingenuous thing that he could say at this point, though, and he has basically suggested this, that the Canadian government, he was said, has done all it can to open up all this money for corporations, and that now it's in the hands of the private sector to do something. That sounds a lot like hand washing to me. And knowing that, that they understand the system that they created, that just isn't reasonable to me for him to suggest that that the guilt lies with the private sector.
Well,
the guilt lies with the government.
Yeah, you make a very good point. He's basically saying trickle-down economics would work if these people wouldn't wreck it by not reinvesting the money that we put into their possession. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. He's He's defending the ideology by demonizing the actions of a few people that he's in bed with, mind you.
I get it too. I mean, the hardest part is that I do agree with them in the sense that, you know, yes, okay, morally, I get it. You're trying to make you're trying to pressure them, but the other thing is that seems to never work when you're talking to a corporation. Morals do not have any concern.
I have a piece of advice for Jim Flaherty. You don't just have to wash your hands and walk away when a corporation behaves in an antisocial manner. You change the law to make them behave in a social manner.
Right, and that's one of the things that some policy alternative economists have suggested too, is that perhaps maybe at a certain point, after a corporation sits on money like this for so long, maybe they should be taxed on. There should be a tax rate based on how long they sit on this money.
Absolutely, this is a good idea. The tax cut was based on the idea that it would incentivize corporations to spend money on creating jobs. However, if it's demonstrable that this tax cut is not used for this purpose, maybe you can disincentivize them to do what they're doing.
Take that back and say, okay, you're not doing anything with it.
Didn't work. Turn it around.
You know what it reminds me of, in a way, Tony, is that stupid game from when we were kids called Jenga.
Mm-hmm.
You take a block from the bottom and you put it on top.
Yeah.
What happens in Jenga after a while?
It always falls down.
The fucking tower falls down.
Or I get sick of it and knock it down. No, I'm just kidding.
Either way,
it's fun to knock it down.
That's exactly what they're doing, though, is pulling out pieces from the bottom of the foundation and putting it on top, and it's in a top-heavy system, and that doesn't function. The people at the top, used to have some sort of understanding that you had to have your foundation before you could build a huge tower.
Yeah.
And if they don't realize that, they're fools. But again, at least this is getting some mention in the mainstream media and some decent coverage. There were a number of articles, and like I said, I'll post them up to the webpage there after the show.
Yeah, good
for everyone to read.
Right on. Yeah, so I guess we can conclude our discussion, if you are so willing, on this matter by reiterating the idea that trickle-down economics is absolute bullshit.
I was waiting for you to say that.
Yeah, that's what it is.
Absolutely.
There's no other way to say it.
And we finally, that's our second full story on it, and it's going to keep coming up, and when it does, we'll point it out. And I don't know, do you have a track to play us out of tonight's show?
I sure do. Yeah. Hang on. I'm looking for it. It'll take me a second, and the reason we keep on talking about trickle-down economics is because if we can't all agree as Canadian voters that trickle-down economics is bullshit, what we're going to get is an NDP government or a Liberal government that employs trickle-down economics. You know that, right?
I don't even want to think about that.
This is the danger of, and I don't mind Thomas Mulcair drifting to the center to get elected. I don't mind it, but the thing is, what is implied by drifting to the center? Are you moving towards supply-side economics? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, we don't want it to become the permanent economic system.
Yeah.
For Canada.
So what we have to agree on then as progressives is that the one unacceptable thing that Thomas Mulcair could conceivably do to get elected, to get himself cozied up to business and financial elites, is to embrace trickle-down economics in his economic plan.